We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Amud Aleph and Meseches Yoma. This is Yoma Daf 50a. On the previous summit, we had a machlokes amoroim. Let's say the Kohen Gadol shechts the power of Yom Kippur, and then the Kohen Gadol dies, and a new Kohen Gadol takes over. Is he allowed to just take the blood of that par, or does he have to do the shechita again? So the Gemara now says, Eisvei Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha Rabbi Ami. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha asked Rav Ami the following question. The pasuk says, V'hotzi es kol hapar. It says he takes out the entire bull. It's talking about a different carbon over here, but as Rashi says, Alma la'achar shchita par karile. You see from this pasuk, even though the shchita is already over, it's still called a par. So the same thing should be true over here. When the first Kohen Gadol does the shchita, you have the blood. The dam hapar should still be called the par, and the second Kohen Gadol should be able to just take the blood. Shouldn't have to do a whole new shchita. And the Gemara answers, Sheyotzi es kulo. The pasuk over here means to say, you take out the entire thing, as Rashi over here says, Sheyotzi es kulo teirutzahu. This is the Gemara giving an answer. Kilomar lav de ikri par, meaning to say, the pasuk is not saying that the shechted par is called a par. Elahachikamar, here's what the pasuk really means. Yotzi es kol hanishar mimenu. Take kol hapar, take everything that is remaining, you got to take it out. Michutz lamachana, that's the context of the pasuk. Gemara tries another proof. V'as par hachatos v'asir hachatos. Pasuk says the par hachatos, the par carbon chatos, and the seir that's a carbon chatos. As Rashi over here says, v'as par hachatos kushu. This is a question. V'aksiv v'as par hachatos gabe Yoma Kippurim. It says the phrase, this is the par hachatos. Ulachar matan damu mishtoi kro lahotziim l'sreifa. And the context of that pasuk is after you've already done the matan damim. So again, you see you're talking about a situation after shchita, and we're still calling it the par hachatos, the seir hachatos. So the Gemara says, Amar of Papa, Rav Papa says, Ba'or ubasar uperesh de kulial malo pligi. When it comes to the hide of the animal, when it comes to the flesh of the animal, when it comes to the excrement of the animal, there is no machlokas. Rashi over here says, Ba'or ubasar uperesh heichad de mishtoi kra beguf hapar. When the pasuk is talking about the actual par, the actual bull, sha'oro v'saro pirsho, you're talking about the hide, you're talking about the flesh, you're talking about the excrement, kul and yachad, they're all together. Ki hasam, that's the context over there. Kuliyamalo pligi the mikri par. Everybody agrees that's called a par. That's not even a question. So that's why that pasuk is not a kasha when it says ves parachatos. It's talking about all the particular parts of the par. That's for sure going to be called a par. Ki pligi. What is the whole machlokas amoroim? B'dam. The only machlokas is really by blood. Mar savar dam ikri par. One says the dam hapar is called par. Umar savar dam lo ikri par. The other one says the dam hapar is not called par, as Rashi over here says. Ki pligi lagabe bias panim. The whole machlokas amoroim on the previous amud is when you're going into the kodesh kadoshim. Sheino machnesham el hadam. There you're only dealing with the blood. So that's a machlokas whether you can just take the blood again from the power of the first Kohen Gadol, or you have to do the shechita again. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravashi. Ravashi says, Mistabra commando Amar dam ikri par. It makes more sense like the one who says that the blood of the par is called a par. Because the pasuk says, Bezos yavo Aaron el HaKodesh, bepar ben bakar. It talks about the fact that Aaron goes into the Kodesh Kadashim with the bull. So the Gemara says, Ato bekarne ma'ayale, is he bringing the bull in by the horns? Ela bedama, we're obviously talking here about the blood. The kari le par, and it says it's called the par. It says, bepar ben bakar. So you see the dam hapar is called a par, so it seems to be a raya to that position. Gemara says, v'idach, in the other position, the pasuk really means as follows, Ba'meh huchshar Aaron lavo el HaKodesh. How does Aaron prepare to go into the Kodesh Kadashim? Bepar ben bakar lechatos, he prepares with a par ben bakar lechatos, as Rashi over here says, Ba'meh huchshar lavo ma yaseh kadei sheyeh rashoy likonis. What does Aaron do in order to be permitted to enter the Kodesh Kadashim? Yavi par chay la'azara. He brings a living bull to the Azara. V'yasa avodah shebinyan. He does the avodah. So in other words, in the context of the pasuk, it is actually talking about a live par. And the Gemara continues, V'tepuk lei the chatas shemesu be'alahi. We should say that this is considered a carbon chatas that the original owner died. In other words, in a situation where you have the first Kohen Gadol dies after he does the shechita of the par, we should say the second Kohen Gadol is not allowed to use the blood from the first animal, because it should be no different than a carbon chatas where the original owner died. V'chatas shemesu be'alah lemisa azla. The halacha is, if you have a carbon chatas where the original owner dies, you have to let the animal die, meaning you can't use it. So the same thing over here, you shouldn't be able to use the blood. Rashi over here says, we should answer the question we had before, that for sure a second Kohen Gadol cannot use the shechita of the first Kohen Gadol of his par. Because again, it's a carbon chatas where the original owner died. And so the Gemara answers, Amar le Rav and Bar Avada le Rava. Rav and Bar Ravada says to Rava, Amri Talmidecha, your students say, Amar Rav Amram, in the name of Rav Amram, Chatos Tziburhi. This is considered to be a public carbon chatos, velo lamisa azla. When it comes to a public carbon chatos, it doesn't go lamisa, and therefore this case is considered different. Rashi over here explains, Chatos Tziburhi hoel vi Allah vi alecha v'kohanim, but you're bringing this carbon, you're bringing it for himself, for the Kohen Gadol, and for his brethren, the other Kohanim, like the pasuk says, v'chiber ba'ado v'yad beso. So therefore, again, it's a public carbon, and the halacha is not that it's lamisa azla when you have a chatos that's a carbon sibur. And so the Gemara continues now proving that this is considered a carbon sibur. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Meseches Hashas says this is a brisa. Amar lo Rabbi Meir said to him, Valo par Yoma Kippurim. But when it comes to the bull that's brought on Yom Kippur, v'chavise Kohen Gadol, and also when it comes to the meal offering of the Kohen Gadol, uPesach, and also when it comes to the carbon Pesach, the carbon Yachid, who Rabbi Meir's position is all three of these carbonos are considered carbon Yachid. They are not public carbonos, they are private carbonos. V'doches HaShabbos v'yasatoma. And Rabbi Meir says, you see, in those cases, these are examples of carbon Yachid, which are doches Shabbos, which are doches Tumah. That's Rabbi Meir's response to the Tanna Kama. So the Gemara now wants to draw an inference from Rabbi Meir. Lav michlal, the equal amandamar to tzibur. Doesn't Rabbi Meir imply that the other opinion holds, that there's another opinion which holds that these are carbon tzibur? And what's one of the things in this list? Par Yom Kippurim. So you see that there's an opinion that holds that the Par Yom Kippurim is a carbon tzibur. So the Gemara says, what kind of inference is that? According to your reasoning. The Katani, it also says, and this is from a Tosefta, Amar lo Rabbi Yaakov, on the same topic, Rabbi Yaakov says to him, Valo par helam davar shel tzibur. What about the bull that's brought, let's say the tzibur doesn't have veira? Usirei avodas kochavim, or what about the goats that are brought for the aveira of avodah zara? V'chagiga, and also the carbon chagiga, the carbon tzibur. Rabbi Yaakov says all three of these are examples of carbon tzibur. They're public carbonos. V'yein dochin lo es hashabbos v'lo es hatoma, and they're not doche Shabbos, they're not doche toma. So mechlal, the equal amount damar the yachad. Are you going to draw the same inference over here? You draw an inference from Rabbi Yaakov that some people hold these carbonos are considered private. There's no way that these carbonos are all considered private carbonos. They're clearly public carbonos. So therefore, you don't draw the inference. So what's actually happening over here is as follows: What's really happening over here is both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yaakov are responding to the Tanakama. The Shame de Kamar carbon sibur doches hashabbos v'yasatoma. The carbon yachid eno doche lo es hashabbos v'lo es hatoma. The Tanakama's position is that a carbon sibur is doche Shabbos, a carbon sibur is doche toma, and a carbon yachid is not doche Shabbos, a carbon yachid is not doche toma. That's what they heard the Tanakama say. And now Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yaakov both bring proofs that the rule of the Tanakama is incorrect. So Amar lo Rabbi Meir. So that's why Rabbi Meir says, carbon yachid klolo. You think there's a rule that a carbon yachid is never doche Shabbos and toma? V'alo par Yom Kippurim v'chavise Kohen Gadol Pesach. The carbon yachidu again, the par of Yom Kippur, the chavise Kohen Gadol, the carbon Pesach. Those are all individual carbonos. The dochen Shabbos v'yasat toma. The doche Shabbos, the doche toma. V'yamar lo Rabbi Yaakov, and Rabbi Yaakov similarly responds to the Tanakama. Carbon sibur klolo. You think that a carbon sibur, that's a rule that it's always doche toma, it's always doche Shabbos. V'alo par helam davar shel tzibur. What about the par helam davar shel tzibur? Usirei avodas kochavim v'chagiga, and again the sirei avodas kochavim, the carbon chagiga, the carbon sibur. Those are all carbon sibur. V'yein dochen lo es hashabbos v'lo es hatoma. They're not doche Shabbos, they're not doche toma. And so rather what they're arguing is as follows: Elonokon hai klala biyadach. The real rule is as follows: Kol shezmanu kavua. Anytime you have a carbon with a set time, doches Shabbos v'satoma. That's doche Shabbos. It's doche toma. Afilu biyachid. Even if it's a carbon yachid, doesn't matter yachid or tzibur. V'chol she'ein zmanu kavua. And if it's a carbon that doesn't have a set time, eino doche lo es Shabbos v'lo es hatoma. It's not doche Shabbos. It's not doche toma. V'afilu b'tzibur. Even in a tzibur situation. And so the point over here is you have no proof that when it comes to the power of the Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippur, that's a carbon sibur. So that answer is not a good answer. And the Gemara continues, Eisvei Abaya. Abaya asks another question. This is going to be another proof that the par of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur is considered a chatos sibur. This is from a Tosefta. It says, par v'sor shel Yom Kippurim, talking clearly about the par of Yom Kippur. She'avdu, let's say they get lost. V'hifresh acherim tachteim, and then you separate other animals instead. So kulam yamusu, you find those original animals, they all have to be left to die. V'chein seirei avodas kochavim, same thing, let's say you have the goats for the Isser of avodah zara. She'avdu v'hifresh acherim tachteim, they get lost, you separate other ones. Again, and they're found, the first ones are found. Kulam yamusu, you have to let them all die. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, Omrim, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, they disagree, and they say, Yiru Achi Estoavu, those original animals, let them graze until they develop a blemish. V'yimachru, then you could sell them. V'yiplu demehen l'nedava, and then you can use the money for nedava, meaning use the money for carbon olos as donations. She'ein chatos tzibor mesa, because the principle is that if you have a carbon chatos that is a public carbon chatos, you don't allow it to die. So clearly here as well, we're referring to the power of Yom Kippur as a carbon that is a carbon chatos. Rashi over here says, Kulon yamusu dehavelo chatas shekipru ba'aleh. In other words, these are all cases of a carbon chatas where the bailam already got a kapara from that second animal. The chomesh chatos mesos. The general rule is there are 5 types of carbon chatas that die, and they are the following: vlad chatas, the offspring of a carbon chatas; utmuras chatas. Let's say you took a carbon chatas and you made a tmura. You said this animal should be like this. The chatas shemesu ba'aleh. You have again, like we said before, a carbon chatas where the original owner dies. The shekipru ba'aleh, or a situation where a carbon chatas where the bailam already got kapara, which is this case right here. The she'avra shenas, and if the year passed from the animal, all of those are cases where the carbon chatas dies. So again, they're having a machlokas over here. Does this, in this particular case, does it die? And the response again of Rabbi Lazar and Shimon is she'ein chatos tzibor mesa v'chi gemiri chomesh chatos mesos b'yachid gemir. In other words, Rabbi Lazar and Shimon say this whole idea that there are 5 kinds of carbon chatos that are left to die, that's by carbon yachid. It doesn't apply by carbon tzibor. And Abaya's proof is you see clearly that the power of Yom Kippur is considered a carbon tzibor. So the Gemara says, Amar Lei said to him, my par, you know what par over here means? Par helam davar shel tzibur. It's not talking about the par of Yom Kippur. It's talking about the different par. It's talking about the carbon that's brought. Let's say the tzibur doesn't have veir. The par helam davar shel tzibur. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? V'hashel Yom HaKippurim katani. It says in the Tosefta Yom Kippur, it says par v'sar shel Yom HaKippurim. How could you say we're talking about a par helam davar shel tzibur? So the Gemara says, Ki katani ad soir. No, that's going on the goat. In other words, it's par. Then you put a big comma over there. It's really talking about the par helam davar shel tzibur. And then it's v'seir shel Yom HaKippurim. Also the soir of Yom Kippur. It's 2 separate comments. The words shel Yom HaKippurim don't go on the par. So the Gemara says, V'atani, but 1 second. We have a brisa that says as follows. Par shel Yom HaKippurim. Clearly here we're talking about the par of Yom Kippur. V'sar shel Yom HaKippurim, and also the sar of Yom Kippur. She'avdu, it's the same exact case. They get lost. V'hifer shachem tachteim. You separate others. You use other animals. Kulam yamusa, the same halacha. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. They all have to die according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, Omrim, and Rabbi Lazar and Shimon say, Yiru achi estava. You let them graze till they develop a blemish. V'yimachru v'yiplu demein l'nedava. You sell them. You use the money again for nedava, for olas nedava. She'ein chatos tzibur mesa, because a public carbon chatos does not die. So here clearly, in this brisa, we're clearly talking about the power of Yom Kippur, and we're calling it a chatos tzibur. So the Gemara answers, Lo tema she'en chatos tzibur mesa, elema she'en chatos hashutfin mesa. Just change the text of the brisa. It doesn't mean that the chatos of a public chatos doesn't die. It is that a chatos that belongs to partners, if it's owned by more than one person, that's not supposed to die. And we'll take a look at Rashi over here. Rashi says, Linadava, that's referring to the opinion of Rabbi Lazar of Shimon. They say you don't allow the animals to die. Instead, you let them graze. They develop a blemish. You sell it. And then you use the money for Nadava. What's Nadava? L'keitz mizbeach. In the summertime, they'd always want to have animals on the mizbeach. V'ikruya nidvas sibur. That's called nidvas sibur. You bring carbon ola so that the mizbeach is always busy. That's always brought from any of these animals that are left to graze. Again, you use the money for this purpose. And then the Gemara finally says it's not a chatos sibur, it's a chatos hashutfin. Shein chatos hashutfin mesa de Rabbi Shimon savar chamesh chatos hamesas bechad makom agmarinu rachmana l'Moshe. These 5 carbon chatoses that died, they were all taught together to Moshe Rabbeinu. Ma temuras chatos mesa lesa b'shutvis. Just like there's no such thing as a tmura by an animal that's brought in partnership. Shein carbon hashutvis osa tmura. The principle is that a carbon of partners cannot have a halach of tmura. T'chsivim hamir yamir. By tmura it says the individual makes tmura. Lashon yachid, that's singular. Af kulan einon mesas b'tzibur. So too, all of these things, they don't die if it's betzibur, v'lo b'shutfin, or even if it's a partnership. Afilu hamitzuyos behen, even if you have a situation where you have a partnership, that's explained in Horios. And so the Gemara continues, but what difference does it make that you change the text of the Brisa from Chatos Tzibur to Chatos HaShutfin? We're still at the exact same place. Both a Chatos Tzibur and a Chatos HaShutfin are not left to die, as Rashi over here says. If at the end of the day, the animal is not left to die because it's a carbon HaShutfin now, instead of a carbon Tzibur, V'shapir Taretz, Rav Amram La'el. So Rav Amram's answer before is perfectly good. What was his answer before? His answer before was that just because the first Kohen Gadol dies doesn't mean it's Lamisa Azla because this is a Korban Tzibur. Well, that answer still applies. Just because the first Kohen Gadol dies, it's not Lamisa Azla because it's a Korban HaShutfin. Lahad Kasha Lon, that which you had this question, typically the Chatas Shemesu Ba'alehi, you had asked originally that this is a Korban Chatas where the original owner, meaning the original Kohen Gadol, died. My nafkale l'Rava l'sluke l'Rav Amram. So what does Rava help to get rid of Rav Amram's answer? Mimai dekarya chatas sibur uloukme bechatas hashutfin, to change the word from chatas sibur to chatas hashutfin. Both ways, it's a very good answer. Rav Amram is saying this is a chatas hashutfin, and therefore it's not lemisa azla. So therefore, it doesn't matter that the first Kohen Gadol died, and still we have the same issue. That was not a good answer. You can't say that the reason he can't use the blood of the first animal is because it's lemisa azla. It's not lemisa azla. It's going to be, in this particular case, a chatas hashutfin. And so the Gemara answers, Delo maisu kohanim par bahura. The nafkamina between whether it's a chatas sibor or a chatas hashutfin is whether kohanim bring what's called the par helam dover shel sibor. Rashi over here explains the answer. The lo maisi kohanim par bahura. Kohanim will not bring the par helam dover shel sibor. Rashi says kilomar. What it means to say is as follows. Bebayon vaday modinon de mitarzi. You're right in terms of our original question. Either way, we're answering the original question. Beini ikri chatas sibor. Beini ikri chatas hashutfin. It really doesn't matter if we call the par of the Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur a chatas sibor or a chatas hashutfin. Either way, it's not lemisa azla, and you're correct. We've answered the original question. You cannot say that the reason why the second Kohen can't use the blood is because this is a chatas shemesu ba'aleh. That's not a good answer. Because this is a chatas shemesu ba'aleh, that's a chatas hashutfin. That's true. But still, we want to change the text of the Brisa. All Rav is saying is, I don't want to call this a chatas hatzibor, because then students might get the wrong idea and they'll think, Shemhoru bezin shel kohanim, lavor alachas min ha-mitzvahs. Let's say a bezin of kohanim, they give a psak that's incorrect, and they say you should do an aveira. V'yasu kohanim al piyem, and the kohanim, the shevet of kohanim, do what they said. So sheyu mevi'in par helam davar kechem mikol hashvatim. You might think that kohanim bring a par helam davar shel tzibur, just like if that happens to a shevet. The halach is that if one of the shvatim does this, they do bring a par helam davar shel tzibur. The kaim olon shevet echad ikri kahal, because we established that a shevet, that's called a kahal, and they bring a par helam davar. But kohanim vaday lav ikru kahal, but the shevet of kohanim, that's not called a kahal. Ela osan shenotlu nachal. It has to be people who take an inheritance in the land. So the only reason we're changing the text of the Brisa is so you don't get the wrong idea, because again, this power of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur is brought on behalf of the kohanim. And if we call it a chatas hatzibur, people will think that kohanim are kahal, and they'll think that they also bring a par helam davar. So we're saying they don't bring a par helam davar. This is really a chatas hashutfin. It is a chatas for a number of people, but it's not called a chatas tzibur. The Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, another proof. The boy Rebbe Lazar asks as follows, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Amud Beis.